Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I just want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Tracy Kaptein. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Duffy Kruspodin, where I also lead our firm's AI initiatives. As a firm, we view AI not simply as a technology discussion. And in fact, if you were listening to Joy and I, we were kind of talking a little bit about that a few minutes ago. I think about it a little bit more as a business strategy discussion. That's why we started hosting these conversations, is to help our clients understand not just what's possible, but what we think makes sense. Today, we're going to explore, there are some broad strokes in terms of what we're going to cover from a professional services standpoint, but we are going to dig in to how law firms more specifically are approaching AI, where they're finding practical value, and some of the key considerations for adopting it responsibly. And so a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. I think I did, if you didn't mute your mic, I did, but we did leave that access available just in case we want to have some discussion later. But we will have time for questions, so please feel free to submit them just through the Teams chat as we go. And there was a question or two submitted to the speakers in advance. And if you were one of the individuals that submitted that question, we are going to address it also when we kind of get to that point. And so also we are recording today's session, and we're going to send the recording to everybody afterward. So with that, I'd like to introduce Thane, Kelton, and Daniel Lee. If you want to just kind of give yours a quick wave. They lead our professional services practice here at Duffy Kruspodin. Thane is going to share a few opening remarks before introducing our special guest, Youell. Thane, over to you.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Like Tracy said, I'm a partner here. I've been a partner here for 30 years. And we put this together today, with professional services in mind, specifically law firms, which I'm an industry leader with, along with Daniel. And I think today, it's a great opportunity for a lot of reasons, because we're seeing what's going on across all our industry groups. I'm also involved in real estate and franchising, but this group especially, it's of special interest because our business models are very similar. We're going to run up against the same things when implementing AI. And so I'm especially looking forward to this. Joy is here today. She's an AI strategist. She's there from the beginning. I think she helped write some of the stuff, and she's partnered with us, working on our training, our advisory council, and how to roll this out. And so we're going to share specifically to law firms what you're probably running up against, share some of what we're up against and what our clients are running up against, and then take any questions. But again, thank you all for being here today. I know you're busy just like us, but I promise this will be a lot of value. Up to you, Joy.
Awesome. Thanks, Thane.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to dive right in. Like Thane and Tracy said, my name is Youell. I came into AI early, about 20 years ago, as part of a large language model development. So I helped with some of the technology that underpins the frontier models that you all use today, which is super exciting. So as such, I kind of was part of the early mechanisms, right, of how artificial intelligence became embedded in what we now know as chatbots, right, and the way that we kind of access it today. And then over the years evolved kind of my role into AI operationalization, which is essentially how do we actually use this stuff, right, in the real world and in businesses. So I've worked with probably about 35 of the top 200 accounting firms, and then a variety of SaaS and other technology companies, and do a lot of AI advisory and all of that, because it is hard to extract value from this nascent technology, right, and figure out how do we actually put it into practice in a way that yields ROI, in a way that makes sense with our business models and all of that, especially when we have things like the billable model, right, which are up against where we've got billable hours as part of the way that our businesses function, and we're all talking about trying to do work faster and not actually sure if that's what we want to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about context, right, where we're at in the market right now in terms of AI, and then a little bit about how it is affecting the legal profession specifically, the kinds of technologies that are being built out for this profession, and then the ways those technologies are potentially impacting both the current and future of your business. All right. Interrupt me at any time. We've got eyes on the chat. I'm happy to answer questions. I want this to be as interactive as possible since we're a nice small group. So obviously AI is kind of still in its gold rush era. If you're following the news, I mentioned the words frontier models. If you're familiar with that term, that is the things like OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexities. We have these large companies that are really the ones who are paving the way, I guess, for the democratization of this technology, right? They're the ones who have put it into everybody's device, who are the ones, getting Gemini on your phone, getting ChatGPT on your computer at work, all of that. We're seeing massive investments still being made. There's lots of obviously speculation about whether or not these will continue to be made, about what these valuations depend on. Most people believe that the valuations of Anthropic and OpenAI are largely dependent on model performance, which feels tenuous at best because you have to keep topping yourself, right, to continue to be valuable in the marketplace. But we're just seeing as quickly as the models are, continuing to perform and then outperform each other. We've got continuous opportunities, right, to embed these in more and more sophisticated tasks, right? One of the early objections to using artificial intelligence in professions like yours, like the legal profession, or ours, like the accounting profession, was that it lacked the sophistication, right? We're having less, that's less and less true. It's less and less true that it does lack the sophistication. With the newest models coming out, it's more and more true that it is as sophisticated as it needs to be to rival at least your early stage careerists. So businesses are buying into this. I'm sure your business has bought into this. That's why you're here, right? And we're seeing massive and wide-scale deployments across the board of what we would call generative AI. So generative AI is just simply AI that can create something. So we have many forms of AI I'm sure you've heard of, generative AI and agentic AI being kind of the two big ones. But I would say largely that while AI is being invested in widely, AI is being put into practice widely, there doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity about whether or not it's doing anything. Like, is it actually working? Are we actually seeing any kind of benefit from it? So if you've seen, studies have come out talking about how the AI initiatives aren't yielding any ROI. We're finding, CEO studies are doing surveys that, CEOs and CIOs and CTOs are going, are we actually seeing any benefit from this? We went through a great, staffing purge, and now we're seeing a bunch of rehiring because of the way that AI is or perhaps is not as effective as originally thought, all of that. And so what I would posit to you is that there's a measurable gap, right, between activity and effectiveness. And as business leaders, it is our job to diagnose what that is if we want to see a benefit from these investments that we're all making. So I think that there are a few different reasons. And as somebody who has sat in a lot of businesses at a lot of different sizes who are trying to implement AI, been on a lot of advisory boards, here are the main reasons that there is a gap between activity and effectiveness, why you're doing stuff related to AI and you're not seeing results, or you're not seeing efficiencies, or you're not seeing any kind of measurable ROI. The first, okay, is that many times self-motivated employees are outpacing your organization in terms of AI adoption and use. So BYO AI. Anybody heard of this term? Bring your own AI, okay? This is something that I think this was 2 years ago. This survey came out. It was a Microsoft survey. 78% of AI users were bringing their own AI tools to work. Now, being law firms, I would guess that your people are less brave about venturing into uncharted tools, right? Unapproved tools. So hopefully this is not as true for you, because the risk is probably far higher for them making mistakes or using unsanctioned tools at work. That said, the people who are often leading AI in most organizations are simply those who have chosen to do so. Okay. And that was where most organizations really started. And I'm not talking about just a small 50 or $100 million organization. I'm talking about multi-billion dollar organizations. It was still people who were self-motivated, who were taking the initiative. Their companies didn't have formalized training programs. They didn't have formalized pathways. They didn't have the sanctioned tools, the enterprise grade tools, all of that. A second reason is that AI use is not really defined, nor is its performance. So So this is like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was consulting with a company, and it's like a $500 million company. And they were talking about how they're going to start using AI use as part of their performance reviews for their employees. I said, okay, cool. What does that mean? Like what are the actual, like, what are you measuring in order to, and it's chatbot usage. And I was like, okay, wait. So you're telling me that you're taking professionals and you're saying if you use chatbots a certain amount of time, that will be measured positively on your performance report. And if you don't use chatbots, that will be measured. Like, that is not a good enough metric. Like chatbots themselves, right? Out of the box Copilot, out of the box ChatGPT, right? Even out of the box tools like that are built for your profession, just using them is not a strong enough metric to be able to determine if somebody is, if it's effective at all, right? All you're doing is talking to a chatbot. You don't know if they're actually yielding any kind of benefit from it. You don't know if they're actually doing anything effective. You don't know if they're actually augmenting their work or if it's just busy work or shortcuts, all of that. So that was wild to me. And I think that that is often a reason that we cannot measure ROI, is because we don't actually know what it would look like. We don't actually know how to measure it. We don't know what the before was. We don't know what the after was. We have no idea what that calculation is. And so that's tricky. So organizations are often confusing tool access and individual usage with enterprise transformation. Usage does not equal effectiveness. So I think that those two reasons are pretty compelling. I think they're pretty pervasive. And I think if you stop and think about your own context, you could probably identify at least some version or variation of them, either your own people being extremely motivated and further ahead than the firm, or success not being defined, right? In that you don't actually know how to measure what it would look like if you were truly successful. Any questions there? And then I want to talk a little bit about how we've already got AI in play in our firms today. Awesome. Feel free to raise your hand at any time or throw something in the chat, but I'm going to plug on, charge on, plug away, whatever. I don't think plug on is right. There was a different version there. So AI is already very much embedded in your law firm, right? There's plenty of data to back this up. We've got 80% of law firm professionals expect AI to fundamentally change legal practice. You're here because you believe this, right? If you were naysayers, you probably wouldn't be here. So I'm going to just assume that you all believe that AI is going to, at some point, impact your profession. That said, many firms, nearly 1/3, say that their firms are adopting AI too slowly. Do any of you feel that way? You don't have to raise your hand. You feel your firm is adopting AI too slowly, or that you simply don't know what's next, don't know what the roadmap looks like. And almost half of firms do already report some measurable benefits from AI adoption, but it may be that the next juncture, either going agentic or, building your own technology, or, whatever the next step is, feels like a leap maybe that is hard to take. So we're not really asking anymore about whether or not AI belongs in the legal profession, because it's become a competitive imperative, really. But we're more asking, how are we going to adopt it without sacrificing quality, ethics, or client trust, which are obviously very important. We know that AI is already in your legal technology stack. I often say this, like, you have food at home, right? It's like when you tell your kids, like, we don't need to go out to eat. We have food at home. You already have AI in your tech stack. It's going to be very unlikely that you need to go out into the world and find a whole bunch of new technology in order to AIify your practice, right? You've got AI embedded in many of the tools you already use, which you can see on the screen. So often it's not a matter of having the tools, it's a matter of knowing where the AI is in your tools and then understanding how that works, understanding what the intelligence layer looks like. Most people conflate automation with AI all the time. They think, oh, we need to go build an agent for X, Y, or Z. And we'll get pitched, my agency will get pitched the project and we'll be like, actually, that's just an automation project. Like, there's no AI involved in that at all. So it's important that you understand and start to gain fluency around what is and isn't AI, because we're in the gold rush era, There are a ton of tech opportunists out there who are going to try to sell you things. So you have to be really cautious about what you're being sold. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But the anatomy of legal work is absolutely a good basis for many of the functions that AI is suited for, right? Organizing content, sifting, parsing, matching, finding aberrations, data, structure, normalization, all of that. But what AI can't do, obviously, is provide professional judgment or build trust with your clients. So the idea, I mean, I think we've all eschewed the idea pretty handily and thoroughly that AI is going to replace us. I don't think anybody still believes that, right? Nobody believes that, hopefully, in this room. Yeah, I think we're good, right? We know that that's not true. And especially in our professions where people are very much trusting us with a practice that they themselves cannot do. We're not replaceable in that way. But it is important that we understand where AI can create value, right? Even in extremely large firms, right? I worked with the CIO of a $3 billion firm. He's saying we stand up a piece of software a day, right? We're working very proactively. AI is extremely involved in providing value. And we know that things like all the use cases you see in front of you have tools that are purpose-built and AI augmented to be able to use to support legal research, litigation, transactional processes, client service, knowledge management, things like that. So the highest return is that they're just reducing the amount of time, right, that we're having to go out, find information, parse information, review documentation, put documentation together, right? All of that kind of work is being truncated, which is not the kind of work that high-level lawyers are doing anyway. So that's obviously an important differentiator. This is the $1 million question, the $1 billion, the $1 trillion. How many dollars? This is the many, many dollar question. One of the things that every single person in this room has to think about right now, right, is the billable hour. I mean, I'm a consultant. I have to think about the billable hour as well. If we start going to market and clanging the drum of efficiency and saying that, like I said before, the metric of success for AI utilization is going to be efficiency, I mean, I think we can already see the writing on the wall, right? You could fill in the X, Y, and Z of that narrative. Immediately, you're going to see that how is the marketplace going to respond to the idea that their, four-figure an hour lawyer is suddenly doing things in half the time, right? And what's more, in most of our professional services instances, right, in most of our organizational structures, our comp models are based around billables and billable hours. So we're not incentivized necessarily to do things faster anyway. So I think this is important. This is an important thing that all of us are going to have conversationally around perhaps value-based pricing, perhaps how we're thinking in terms of the organizational future of how we're going to market, of how we're positioning ourselves in the market. And I think that the biggest question that I have and the conversation that I have with a lot of partner groups in accounting and in law is this essentially, right? If AI lets our professionals work in half the time, what are our clients paying for? And the answer isn't less, but go ahead.
No, this one also makes me think about just communications, right? And we were talking earlier, and I don't know if now's the time, Joy, right? But the human element, right? And you already talked about, right, as we all know, it's not going to replace, but the reality is a lot of this is happening out in the market today. And you said, right, if AI lets your attorneys finish work in half the time, what are clients paying for? Well, clients are already starting to ask those questions, right? And so I think about the human side and communications and helping our clients really understand the value of, and it might sound funny, right? Human, but it's all of us sitting here, right? And what we know and what we can do.
I agree. And I think if we rush to market with AI forward and we rush to market with the messaging, we're going to invite these questions a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Which is problematic.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's something to be thinking through, and perhaps we can have a conversation about it during the question time, but I'll be interested to know if y'all have already started as firms having that conversation about what value-based billing would look like, how you would potentially change in terms of, you know, a long-term business model, what productization looks like, all of that. Yeah.
Can you hear?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us? We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
I have a question. On your first green box on the left, as I'm looking at it, it says that if we use the AI, we're gonna save 190 hours per year, and then that, it's estimated that's a $20 billion in annual productivity gains, meaning that we're gonna save time, because of information finding such that we can do more work? Does that mean we're working more? That means those 190 hours that we save, we can be working more to make more money?
I
mean,
don't know.
seriously,
Say it
What does
again.
it mean? Yes?
I think so. It's when we talk about it in the accounting profession, for example, right, is when you can reduce hours, because it doesn't talk about where you're reducing your hours. And so think of the more administrative, repetitive, if we just use that as an example. And so if you take that away and you save a bunch of time, it really means you can spend more time on more valuable things for your clients, services, advisory, etc.
But then I see your next box, your green box says that some corporations are saying, hey, we need to value this differently because while we're getting it done quicker, we can't be only saying 2 hours. We got to give you value pricing. Is that what people are doing?
That is where they're headed. So I was at an agent conference with the CEO of TR a few weeks ago, and that's his big position, right? Because they have co-counsel, right, which is the big, you know, platform for you all, or if y'all are a legal firm, and then they're coming out with a business tax product in the next year or so. And you know, there's a variety of approaches to it, right? Some people are saying go down market, some people are saying go into value-based pricing. So I think, yeah, I mean, the idea is you recover productivity, but at some point the market's not going to bear the narrative that my lawyer's doing half the time, right, but still billing the same hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The optics of that are fundamentally problematic and probably not going to pan out, right? We're going to have a solution that answers clients' questions about time savings and billing and how those two things reconcile in terms of the value that they still receive at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll mute us
Yeah.
again.
No, you're totally fine. I know I feel like every executive team I talk to, this is the conversation, right? Around, you know, TR is using this language because they're going to sell their products, obviously, right? And then we've got the reality of so much of, you know, what 90% of our firms, law firms, are still structured this way. How are we going to move forward with that? It's not an easy change, and it's not going to be fast either. So it'll be interesting to see the kinds of decisions the firms make and how we all get there. All right. You know, I definitely think that if I look at, you know, so I go to a lot of AI conferences, obviously, and talk to a lot of AI colleagues in the profession and outside. And this is essentially where what we're saying is next. Okay. So pretty much everyone agrees that in the legal profession that this is kind of the next wave of where the frontier models will take us in terms of the LLM development and agentic evolution. So we're looking at autonomous legal research, we're looking at matter level co-pilots, and contract lifecycle already exists. We've already got, I can't remember what product it is, but another agentic conference I was asking, they were talking about how they now have agents doing contract negotiations with other agents. Like contract negotiations don't even happen between humans anymore. Like it's just agent versus agent, that kind of thing. So I think that already exists, but I think it will become a little bit more mainstream. And obviously it always happens at a more, you know, Fortune maybe 100 level, and then it'll come downstream eventually. But AI managed review workflows, agentic matter management, outcome-based service delivery is going to be the thing, which obviously harkens back to what we were just talking about, which is how we're going to all have to kind of reconcile our messaging and our go-to-market. So I think the question is how, right? How are our firms, how are our organizations going to adapt to this? How are we going to message it out to our clients and make sure that we're still delivering a product and a service that people are happy with? So this is kind of the idea, right? That we don't, the delta between the performers, the lower performers, the winner, I'm not gonna say winners and losers, but perhaps those who have a little bit of a lead versus those who don't, is really not a matter of access to better tools or even yeah, I would say it's not a matter of access to better tools. It's not a matter of training on better tools. It's really a matter of utilization, right? What is the utilization rate? And we have found largely that utilization starts at the top, right? When I go into an organization, the first people I want to talk to is the executive team, because if the executive team is not using AI, not thinking about AI, not part of the advisory committee, not part of the decision making, like actually using it, right? If they're not actually using it, there is a much higher probability that the rest of the organization does not and will not use it on a regular, consistent basis. That adoption somehow seems to be incredibly crucial to the long-term sustainability of any kind of AI advancement or AI projects. And then the future of the professionals. And so TR's research, that the organizations with a visible AI strategy are more likely to report revenue growth, more likely to realize the benefits from AI, which feels a little bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but there you have it. So let's talk a little bit about the tools, because while the tools may not make or break you, the tools will make or break whether or not your people use AI, because if they don't work in your tech stack and they don't work with the rest of what your people are already doing, then they won't use them, right? I always say, like, the best tool for you is the one that your people will use, right? So make sure that that's the one you pick. So just being aware a little bit of what y'all have options for. So I mentioned this before, I'm going to mention a third time now, just that frontier models, just so you have a little bit in your lexicon of how we refer to these kind of technologies. So frontier models are the big guys, right? So they're the main large language model systems. There will not be any others. Okay, there's too big of a data moat for there to really ever be another large language model in the English language that can keep up, because of the amount of self-training that the models do at this point, okay, with user data. So ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, Perplexity, those are probably the big ones that you've heard of. Those have a lot of strengths. They're not sufficient. So if you're trying to implement AI widely in a professional services setting, that's why you have purpose-built tools that have been layered on top of it. Now, I should mention to you, in case you don't know, so frontier models, like I said, large language models, all the purpose-built tools are going to be wrapped around a frontier model. So none of these are inventing any kind of AI technology. They're just using the AI technology that exists and have some kind of SaaS capabilities built on top of them, okay? These are all wrappers. Everything is pretty much a wrapper now that's being sold as AI. So that's just what it is. And these will be at varying levels of, competence, capability. You probably all have used CoCounsel and Lexis, I would assume. Probably Westlaw. These are pretty straightforward and pretty streamlined. And so before you, buy any AI tool, you want to think about what's providing the intelligence, right? How sure you are about the source material, and then how sure you are about the wrapper that's on top of it. So that's where you have to get, you guys are lawyers, so you're used to reading stuff. So, read the documentation. Make sure you like how the ethical principles behind what they're sourcing, all of that. We've all seen the news, right? You guys don't want to get caught out using something that you're not confident in. And then the build versus buy conversation. So this is a conversation I'm having with people all over the place. So what is it? McDermott, Schulte, Will, whatever. I don't know. Mike Shea, CIO, it's a $3 billion law firm, was talking about this, and it's build versus buy. He's saying they've gone the build route now, largely. They have like 25 software engineers on staff or more. And he was talking about how they're going to offload like $10 million in their tech budget next year because of building technology themselves. It's becoming a huge advantage to be able to build technology, and you don't have to have 25 software engineers on staff, right? Even at Duffy, Kruspodin, like, we make this decision all of the time where we have an agency partner and we hire them and we go build agents to do stuff, and we, have that calculation all the time about whether or not it's worth getting something out of the box that we're stuck into a subscription model for the rest of our lives, or we go in and we, hire somebody out to buy it or to build it, and then we own it forever. So this is something that's becoming it. The game changed completely when Claude Code and Codex came out. So I was at a conference a few weeks ago. There were like 450 maybe coders there. It was all software engineers. They said, raise your hand if you still write your own code. One person raised their hand. Like, nobody writes code anymore, right? The SaaS apocalypse, if you've heard of that, happened for a reason. It happened because we're becoming less and less dependent on SaaS solutions that we have to buy, pay for, and be stuck in these long-term contracts with. So it's important to think about the opportunities that you have to build things that either operationally or professionally can support the future of your business. And I would say before you buy any AI tool, ask these questions, all right? What problem are you solving? If you can't define that problem, don't buy it, okay? How are you doing it today? If you can't map a workflow, you should not buy a tool. You need to think about what metric you're actually improving. So I'm keen on, if you can't map the before, you're not going to be able to map the after, meaning you're not going to be able to measure ROI, meaning you're not going to be able to prove whether or not that investment was worth it, et cetera. You can fill in all those blanks. What data it requires, we get hired all the time to do agentic projects and come in and go, oh, wait, it's going to take 9 months to clean up your data like before we can even do anything agentic in your organization. So making sure that you understand the data situation. What happens if a vendor disappears, right? This is a big deal right now because of all the AI opportunists. There's $5 million companies that have one employee because somebody knows how to vibe code something really cool. And they're out there really successfully selling stuff to people. Is that person going to be in business, after they make $10 million or after they sell that technology to somebody? You need to think about some of the durability of some of the things that are being sold, and then who owns the success internally to your organization, because that's the challenge too, right? None of us, well, maybe me, but none of y'all, we're technologists by trade. Like, none of y'all are AI professionals, nor should you be. And so I think the hard part is there is a measure of fluency that we're all having to develop in order to be able to evaluate these things effectively and ensure that we understand enough to be able to make wise, non-problematic decisions for the future of our organizations. I want to talk a little bit about the skills that we can develop, because it's important to know, what do I have control over? And like I said, the executive adoption being such a key indicator of widespread organizational adoption, it is important to kind of self-evaluate and think, am I developing enough skills to be good enough at using AI-powered tools so that I can model, so that I can troubleshoot, so that I can evaluate team members and things like that. And these are really the 3 big skills. Like, don't overcomplicate it. It's not that complicated to use AI, especially because we have chatbots, right? So it's really prompting. It's knowing enough about how to give AI the right role, the context, the task, all of that. It's agentic thinking. So it's understanding how AI can perform tasks for you, how AI can fulfill roles for you, and then especially multi-agent systems, which is kind of the future of where most of our work is headed. I have an agent employee now, for instance, right? And her name is Claudette, and she's like a full vetted employee in my organization. She has the same rights as an employee in my organization. She has the same permissions, everything like that. Most of us will probably get to that point, right, soon. And so that's key, right? We have to understand a lot about how.
Question. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine.
Can you give us you mentioned that you have an agent that helps with your work, your task. Can you give us just a general example of how that happened? What does your agent do for you?
Sure. So we have a few agents. I have a digital twin, for example. So I don't read or write any emails. I don't answer my phone. I don't do any direct messages or networking. All of that is done by my digital twin. She does all my PR as well. So she responds to all reporter requests and writes all of my PR materials. She does all of my speaking briefs. She makes all my PowerPoints for me.
So question for you, if one of your clients sends you an email with a question and your twin responds, how do you know the content of that response?
There's a manifest, like a log.
And does your twin respond before you give it input and direction?
So she's fully trained as me and has been for about 18 months. So I tested her to the point where I think it was we got her to the point where over 6 weeks I never disagreed with any of her decisions before I put her into autonomous use.
And so if a client sends you a question saying, hey, what are the next steps in my project? And your twin responds to that as you, how do you know what the next steps are? And if they're being implemented?
So she controls and has access to all of our project management systems as well. So she would just reach out to the staff who's in control of that. She would put it up in the project management system, add it to my calendar, add a task reminder, whatever.
Wow.
And there are certain
That's
classifications, right? There are certain kinds
Yeah.
of questions that they would never answer, right? So if they ask like a question about their contract or a question, a personal question, then that would all get escalated to me. But
Yeah, so what she's trying to say is it doesn't actually just do everything like that for you. So if your client had a specific question that like requires a legal answer that the lawyer needs to answer, it would flag that and escalate it to you that that's something that you have to answer.
Okay.
But if it's something that's just like asking about like a calendar date or something, it could do that automatically and give that response because it has access to your calendar and everything like that.
correct. Well said.
But Joy, just to be clear, in the organizational world, so CPA firms, at least I know in ours, law firms, there's not a lot of digital twins in action yet, right? I mean, you would be way at the forefront,
Correct.
you know.
I'd be at the
Just
forefront of getting sued.
Exactly.
right, right. No,
Yes, I'm
No,
talking about
remember-
something that took like 2 years to build. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Sorry,
remember-
carry on.
That's what we were
Carry on.
talking about, the human element, and it's not what Joy just described too, right? It's not all or none. It's how it's, well, I'm gonna use the word build here, but there's even things just I mean, there's all kinds of different levels, right? But as much as I don't like this term, I'll use it because there's AI and there's human. But to what you said, Joy has built it so it recognizes, oh, if this, then it must come to me for review first. But like the nice thing about what's changed is it's not just the client's question that's going to get flagged for you. It's going to prepare the response that you then get to review and revise. And so even if you just think about that small efficiency, but again, it's not like you do it all. There's different levels of it.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So very much similar to this, right? Where you have to spend, I mean, I spent a year mapping my work life. I spent a year narrating every task I did, right? In order to basically map my habits, my thought processes, my decision making, all of these things. It was extensive, right? Building a digital twin is extremely extensive. So I'm illustrating an incredibly sophisticated example. But any task that you want to automate or put into an agentic workflow simply has to be really well defined first, and then you're able to, ultimately put things like that. And then this is obviously the next very, very important factor, which is that you have to have all kinds of governance in place. And, governance is not about what you don't want your people to do. It's about how you are going to scale effectively, safely, securely. I have a great deal of insurance because of the amount of AI that we use and things like that, right? We have IP lawyers, we have all kinds of things. So there's lots of governance considerations, which you all are way more knowledgeable about than I am, but there's plenty of methods and frameworks that you can put into place to ensure that the governance is what it needs to be. And the good news is that because it's digital, there are paper trails, right? There's traceability to all the activity that occurs. So for instance, we not only have agents in my organization, we have agent overseers, right? And those agent overseers are the ones who are responsible for making sure the agents always follow the rules. And they'll write reports if the agents don't follow the rules and things like that. So you've just got layers of safety built in. All right, I'm going to pause there and see if we want to have any questions or things that we want to bring up. I know that we had a couple of questions that were submitted in advance that we'll get to as well. So let's just pause there for a second.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but talking about it improving profitability.
Mhm.
I don't get how it would improve profitability in an hourly law firm. In a contingency law firm, I can understand it because basically you can do a chore quicker, which lets you move on to another case or another chore quicker and more effectively and move the cases. In an hourly firm, if I'm charging 1 hour and I spend that 1 hour on an AI project, and then I jump to another project, I'm still spending another hour, so I'm billing the client for 2 hours. So
Sure.
I don't see any benefit in an hourly firm to AI other than it might make your job a little easier on each of the projects. But I don't see how that impacts profitability.
Yeah. So before you get into the larger like organizational structure conversations, there's really two ways, right? So the first is that you're able to, and this may not be a popular opinion, but it is true, is that you're able to potentially not have to, you're able to not have to hire when you grow, when it comes to your operational staff. So you can create automations within your operations so that you don't have to hire as many administrative staff as you grow. Okay. So that's one way that we've seen cost, kind of pan out. The second is that your professionals can get to the point where they do not spend basically any time doing operational tasks. So like I illustrated, even though you probably wouldn't have it to this degree for quite some time, emails, content production, phone calls, calendaring, any of the kind of just corporate life, routine, operational things that your professionals spend time doing, almost all of that could be eradicated by implementing AI-powered agentic kind of tasks. So that's where you recover profitability in that. Let's say you have an hour a day that you're doing operational things that could then be billed out or be used for a billable task instead. So in advance of, obviously a larger conversation around, billable hour as a structure, those are the two ways that we've seen profitability addressed.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Sure. On that same topic, is there anything that contingency, so non-hourly billing firms are doing specifically that you recommend?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I've seen most of them do is revisit their productization and think through how they're productizing their deliverables, because you can look at whatever the deliverable is, right? And consider all the components of it, how much time it would take, and then how that factors into your like job allocation, assignment, productivity, utilization rates, all of that. And if you revisit that and are able to cut off time, right? Because there's still time, even if that's not how you're billing. So if you're able to change the way that time spend is structured, you're able to functionally create more profitability per head. So I've seen the productization projects have been the most beneficial, I think, so far.
Streamlining tasks. So think of like pound written discovery or prepare a depot notice.
Demand 3 hours to do a job.
Yeah.
You could do it for 1 hour with this. That gives you 2 more hours. You can work on another case and move it along faster. So I can understand the contingency fee. I struggle a little bit with profitability on hourly, except for what she said about cutting overhead.
Yeah. Because you only have so many hours in a day to begin with. Because you can't increase the number of hours.
Right.
Well, I guess maybe a better question is what products or AI products are contingency firms using specifically to accomplish that?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that because I'm not sure it's as much of a tool. I mean, because it would vary based on task, right? So
Sure.
I'm not sure it's as much of a tool selection as it is really more of like an operational decision, right? How you're staffing something, how you're fulfilling, how you're quantifying a task in terms of like hourly assignment or that kind of thing. But I can ask around.
It's the build versus buy too. There's not necessarily, there could be, right, to what Joy said, right, is we'll look into it and tell you what we can research and learn. But to the conversation that we talked about earlier around technology, that I worked in SaaS for a long time, and that's one thing for me is a lot of organizations, even from an operationalized standpoint, because there's new solutions being spun up like every day. There's a plethora of new, you can look at them like software, but they're built on AI. But again, sorry, where I'm going with this is the build versus buy. Because for me, you have to understand obviously a little bit more in the technology, but I see opportunities all over the place to build where 5 years ago I would have went to look at software vendors and what applications were available to do that task. And so anyways, the build versus buy, we're going to continue to talk about, I think, more and more.
But not only that, Joy, I mean, you skipped over a little, but they're like with our firm, and what I'm seeing with a lot of law firms is they're not all on the same page yet. So you do have some people that are great at, some that are not. You
Yeah.
have sometimes some unauthorized tools. And I mean, as a CPA firm with it's the same with your firm, with the records that we have to be so careful, right? So we started with, okay, what do we got to do? Well, first we got to somehow govern this thing. So we got to tell our employees, look, you can use this, you can't use that. These are the choices. And at the same time, make sure that data for us, because it's all over the place. It's been a firm since the 80s. So the data has gone through all kinds of different, places and how it comes into the firm. So we've had to work on straightening that out. And then we had to train our employees, on how to do this, because they really don't, a lot will not take the initiative. And so they're like, well, I don't know how to use this. So we have monthly trainings. Joy runs those monthly trainings. We have an AI council where we decide, okay, what's next? What bot is going to be created? What's going to give us the most bang for our buck? And the whole time we're going to conferences, we're talking to clients, what's working, what's not working. So it's been an evolution. It's, although we're using it, and I think everybody's probably using Copilot at their desks, and we've got some agents that are really starting to make a difference. It's a long process. It's not an overnight thing. And then there's always, again, in the background, there's this like, we have clients, very private data, like, social security numbers, EIN numbers, names. And so there's always revisiting that. So you have to loop in your IT department. So Joy's been great at kind of bringing this all together, but it's definitely a lot slower than I would have thought. And that's what I'm seeing on not just in law firms, across all my clients. Well, where do we go? And then you have the people that are like, oh, let's do it now. Let's get it all done. And it just fails because nobody's trained. They're grabbing the wrong tools. It's this new great tax software. And then all the promises you got, it's like, well, it doesn't really do that. So you have to think it through. And we're so busy, right, as professionals. Like, it's okay, let me stop and think through AI. And so we partner with Joy, and it's helped us a lot. Dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth.
Thanks, Dane.
Joy, do you want to go to somebody actually had submitted a question related to HIPAA. Let's
Yep.
talk a little bit about that and AI.
Yeah, so I think the question was about HIPAA and AI and personal injury cases. So I mean, it's really a zoom out, right? The question around AI and privacy generally is that all the rules around privacy apply, period. The ways that you have to handle data apply regardless of the tool that you're using. So that's why when I was I held up that build versus buy slide and I said, you need to know what you're wrapped against. It's vitally important because anything that you're using that is sitting on top of a frontier model is inheriting the rules of that frontier model. It's why you need to only deploy in your enterprise environment because you're inheriting the controls of your enterprise environment, et cetera. So it's the AI is just governed by your existing ethics duties. So really, it's not a HIPAA problem. It's not a SOC problem. It's not a data governance problem. It's really just about the whatever your ethical responsibility is for handling that data applies. And so it's very important to understand that artificial intelligence is not a separate entity that can be separate. Well, okay, now y'all are lawyers, so you're gonna, you know that this is evolving, right? And there are different cases that are arguing this different ways. But as of now, I don't think we have yet had a case where an artificial intelligence has been considered an entity separate from a human and able to be pursued legally separate from the human who was operating it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there has been a case. So you are culpable as the human using the technology to use it in a way that inherits the rules that govern the usage of that data. Anybody have any questions about that? Or was that clear as mud? Or was that clear enough?
Yeah, I think, especially in our practice, something that, like I'm on the medical malpractice team. So a lot of times, a lot of the way that I use it is if I'm not understanding something medically that's going on with a patient, to understand medical concepts and things like that generally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very wary of, for example, throwing into my Claude Pro account any sort of medical record that might have sensitive information related to my client. And that's because, and I have the controls on my Claude Pro account such that it's not learning off of the information that I put in there. And so I feel like it wouldn't necessarily be, open to the universe if I put that in there, but I still don't, because I don't really fully understand, how private that information remains if it's on my pro account with all of my closed universe settings on it.
Yep.
And that's really kind of how I use it and how it would be helpful. So I think that's kind of where we're not understanding,
Sure.
what remains private and then what gets thrown out into the world.
Yep. I just dropped a link. So Claude Pro is not technically HIPAA compliant. Claude Enterprise is. So I would just say that's a little bit of a difference. What you can do without question is just anonymize it. Right. So before you enter it, don't, just make sure there's no PII in it. And then you can have a scenario-based evaluation or explanation that helps you out. But yeah, Claude Pro is not HIPAA compliant. And same with chat. So ChatGPT business is not, but ChatGPT Enterprise is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. So I think people are, especially, and even in PI cases, we deal with medical records, we deal with clients' financial records all the time. And thank you for clarifying. My understanding is correct. You can't just throw all of that in there.
Right.
And have it do an analysis on the data for you, because that is not compliant.
Right.
So I think we just need to get a better handle on, getting those straight answers before people are just allowed to use things willy-nilly.
Yeah, the enterprise is HIPAA compliant. And like, for instance, at DK and at a lot of corporations, obviously like the Microsoft environment, right? If you have your enterprise control set inside the Microsoft environment, and then you're using Copilot Studio agents that are configured, they'll inherit the enterprise controls. But yes, that's why in your governance documentation, it's really important that it directly addresses every single generative system that you use or that would ingest or be exposed to data, and that you have a minimum exposure threshold set for all of those, and that there's a manifest and a log.
Got it.
Yep. Because there needs to be every platform has different data attrition rates as well. And I know, like, for us, I mean, for accounting firms, it's like what, 7 years holding, and so there's certain things you just need to be thoughtful about, and I'm sure you guys are because you're lawyers. All right, thanks for the question. Any other questions? All right, Trace, I thought we would just finish out. I'm gonna throw up the playbook just so that we kind of show a little bit around what we're doing. Do you want to kind of talk through this just to give a sense of where Duffy Kruspodin is in terms of
Yeah.
the process?
And so I call it a playbook. And so this is something that we've done, but and also advise our clients on doing. And so really what it is there's a few things within the framework that you want to look at. And so you might be doing some of them today, but this is a great place to start. And so if I just speak to our playbook here at the firm, and it's got all of these elements in it. And so where we started was, well, first I created the playbook, then we formed an AI council and talked about what the role of the AI council is. We created a responsible use policy, rolled that out, integrated it into new employee onboarding. Beyond that, we looked at education and literacy, and Thane already kind of talked about what we're doing on a monthly basis now. And there's all kinds of different education and literacy programs out there. But the one example I'll give you is that there's two that come to mind for me. And Joy talked a lot about chat from a technology standpoint, right? In terms of where organizations start. And, I'll be talking to somebody and they're like, yeah, I use AI. And I'll be like, oh, well, like, how are you using it? And they're chatting. And so, yes, that kind of means you're using AI. But for me, the game really changes when you go beyond chat. That's AI. Another one is what that speaks to education and literacy is, oh, well, and pardon my language, right? But it's like, well, this is stupid, or this sucks, this doesn't work. And then when you actually dig in, it's because they didn't know how to write a prompt. It's like something as simple as a prompt, but there is a lot of misunderstanding around how to actually use some of these tools and technology. So beyond all that, though, is Thane also talked about speed, and Joy talked a little bit about use cases earlier, but another key component is use cases and pilots. And you know what? There are some organizations out there that, and Joy can probably speak to this more, some of those that you have to be careful too, that you don't move too fast. I like to move fast because I can see what's going to happen at the other end. But, there's a logical, methodical process you should kind of look at. And so for us, we bit off a fairly significant quarterly use case. But again, we chose and prioritized based on the impact. And so that's something you can consider too. And so anyways, like all said and done, there's all these things in a playbook, and yes, there's kind of a sequence, but the other thing I'd just like to call out is it's not write the playbook, execute the playbook, and you're done. It's continually evolving. And so right now, right, is we're moving to the next level of the council and sub-councils, if you will, and the measurements of success on a use case. But I could keep going on about all of this, but the reality is, and not as much reality, but what I would recommend is you start with your playbook. And so there's a number of things that can obviously happen in tandem, because you don't want to move too slow. Joy, maybe you can kind of speak to speed, but anyways, and then the only other thing is in the green box at the bottom is, and again, I worked in SaaS, so it might be easier for me to more automatically see, is that a lot of companies are jumping straight to the tools because they're treating AI like it's technology. And so Joy, actually, if we can kind of end on that, is how would you kind of wrap that all up? Because there are some misconceptions, and the use of the terminology, it's not necessarily right.
Yeah, I think it gets a little bit philosophical, but AI is not technology, right? Artificial intelligence is a concept. So it's deployed in many ways, large language models being probably the thing that has democratized it and made it available to us as normals, right? And we can use chatbots and things like that. But I think it is important to think about the progression of AI augmentation in your organization regardless. I think there is enough evidence that it would be problematic to ignore this. It would be problematic to ignore the fact that AI is changing our professions, that it's changing our marketplaces, that it's changing the economic model of certain companies, and certain business models are being disrupted, et cetera. So I think there is more than enough evidence at this point that this is not temporary, that it would be, even if it's a dot-com bubble, doesn't mean that the internet went away, right? We've got all kinds of evidence to point to the fact that this has been transformative to the way that we use technology, the way that we work. And so I think it's important to have a plan. And I think that the most competitive companies in the world are leading the way, and they're, the most well-resourced and the most ready to compete at this level with this kinds of AI-powered technology. So I think we all need to get on board with at least having a plan.
I think you said it best. Every organization should have a plan. That's really what we wanted to share with you all today. AI is moving quickly, but if you start with the business and build the right foundation, you'll be in a much better position to take advantage of where you're headed. If you have any questions after today's session or just want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out. Thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.